I think Congress needs one of those horns. Sounds like Louis Armstrong back there.
It is a great honor for me to be in Accra to speak to the representatives, people of Ghana. The 21st century will be shaped by what happens not just in Rome or Moscow or Washington, but by what happens in Accra.
This is the simple truth of a time when boundaries between people are overwhelmed by our connection.
Your prosperity can expand America's prosperity. Your health and security can contribute to the world's health and security. And the strength of your democracy can help advance human rights for people everywhere. So I do not see countries and peoples of Africa as a world apart. I see Africa as a fundamental part of our interconnected world, as partners with America, and that is what I want to speak with you about today. We must start from the simple premise that Africa's future is up to Africa. I say this knowing full well the tragic past that is sometimes haunted. After all, I have the blood of Africa within me. My family's own story encompasses both the tragedies and triumphs of a larger African story. Some of you know my grandfather was a cook. Though he was a respected elder in his village, his employers called him boy.
He was on the periphery of Kenya's liberation struggle, but he was still imprisoned briefly during rebel times.
In his life, colonialism wasn't simply the creation of unnatural borders or unfair terms of trade. It was something experienced personally. It is a great honor for me to be in Accra to speak to the representatives, people of Ghana. The 21st century will be shaped by what happens not just in Rome or Moscow or Washington, but by what happens in Accra. It is a great honor for me to be in Accra to speak to the representatives, people of Ghana. The 21st century will be shaped by what happens not just in Rome or Moscow or Washington, but by what happens in Accra.
Day after day, year after year. My father grew up herding goats in a tiny village, possible distance away from American universities where he would come to get an education. He came of age at a moment of extraordinary promise for Africa. Struggles of his own father's generation were giving birth to new nations.
Beginning right here, we've got Africans were educating and asserting themselves in new ways. History was on the move, but despite the progress that has been made, and then there has been considerable progress in many parts of Africa, we also know that much of that promise has yet to be fulfilled. Countries like Kenya had a per capita economy larger than South Korea.
In many places, the hope of my father's generation gave way to cynicism, even despair. Now, it's easy to point fingers and to pin the blame.
Yes, a colonial map that made little sense helped to breed conflict. The West has often approached Africa as a patron or source of resources rather than a partner. The West is not responsible for the destruction of the Zimbabwe economy.
Wars in which children are enlisted as combatants.
In my father's life, it was partly tribalism and patronage and nepotism in an independent Kenya that for a long stretch derailed his career. And we know that
kind of corruption.
It is a great honor for me to be in Accra to speak to the representatives, people of Ghana. The 21st century will be shaped by what happens not just in Rome or Moscow or Washington, but by what happens in Accra. It is a great honor for me to be in Accra to speak to the representatives, people of Ghana. The 21st century will be shaped by what happens not just in Rome or Moscow or Washington, but by what happens in Accra.